It's one of the main reasons why relations between Turkey and the U.S. have been at their worst in decades. While the last three U.S. presidents from both parties have had differing policies towards Ankara, they've shared one thing: providing military support for the PKK terror group's affiliate, the YPG. Recent photos have shown the group with Bradley armored vehicles, the same type U.S. troops have been using across northern Syria. Turkey has long criticized U.S. military aid that directly threatens its security and border regions. Last month, the U.S. House of Representatives passed next year's defense budget, which includes $177 million in aid for the YPG. Starting in 2015, under the guise of fighting Daesh, the U.S. began providing training and military equipment to the PKK offshoot. The U.S., the EU and Turkey all recognize the PKK as a terror group, which has waged a nearly 4-decade-long war against Turkey that has cost tens of thousands of lives. And to discuss this long-running dispute between the U.S. and Turkey, joining me now from Istanbul is Helin Sari Ertem. She is an associate professor at Medeniyet University. And from Washington, D.C., Rich Outzen. He is a retired military officer and former U.S. diplomat. A warm welcome to you both. So Turkish President Erdogan says the U.S. government supporting the terrorist organization much more than expected. So this kind of shows us that Turkey knew about the support from the very beginning, but now it has reached a point where no one can ignore it anymore. So Helin, talk to us about the extent of this aid and its significance.
Well, actually, this is a part of a United States military strategy. Mr. Outzen will know it better than me, maybe, regarding the military points. But this is a strategy that we call proxy warfare or surrogate warfare. So the United States has long been applying this warfare style in different kinds of conflicts and countries. Mm-hmm. And the latest version of it is in Syria that we see in the close contact with YPG. So I think there's a kind of getting lost in translation. Both sides, Turkey and the United States, have difficulties to understand each other's priorities, each other's requirements, needs in the region. And unfortunately, this gap is getting bigger and bigger between the two allies.
So, Rich, although the U.S. rationalizes its support to the terror organization for its fight against Daesh, what's the real reason behind it?
Well, there's a theory of counterterrorism known as by, with, and through that was very popular for about the last 10 or 15 years in the U.S. that basically says the best way to fight the terror groups that are a threat to the United States is to use small forces, local forces in different theaters so we don't have to have massive U.S. presence. Mm. Now, we've seen the collapse of by, with, and through in Afghanistan, for instance, because in the end, it was a larger commitment of time and people, and it was mixed between sort of a nation-building enterprise and a counterterror enterprise. In the case of Syria, so the U.S. has never felt directly threatened by PKK, and of course there are some who still argue that there's a distinction between YPG and PKK. I do not feel that that is a policy-relevant distinction, but that is the camouflage, if you will, that allows some Americans, certainly in Washington, to justify using this PKK affiliate as a by, with, and through force against ISIS, which is considered to be a direct threat to the United States. This logic, however, is going to come under the same stress that it did in Afghanistan. How long can you sustain that presence and work with a local fighting force when the politics don't line up for it? And neither American support for engagement in Syria nor the dynamics of the Syrian conflict will sustain an open-ended U.S. commitment. So something's got to give.
So, but Rich, why didn't the U.S. choose to work with a NATO ally, Turkey, from the beginning to fight Daesh instead of the YPG? Because so much of this current division could have been avoided, maybe.
Well, I've asked that question to some people who were decision makers at the time. The answer that you get from them is that Turkey was not ready at the time to do a sharp, immediate armed campaign against ISIS. So if you'll think back to this time, it was a time when neither Turkey nor the United States wanted to go into Syria with open force. I liken it to two men coming up to a door and each wanting the other to go through the door first, saying, "You first, please," and the other saying, "You first, please," as well. The United States did not want to commit massive forces. It would prefer Turkey to commit massive forces. Neither was prepared to do so. So the rationalization on the U.S. side is that the YPG was there already fighting against ISIS, and therefore remove the commitment either for the United States or Turkey to send in its own forces. Now, of course, within 2 or 3 years, that logic was undermined by the fact that both Turkey and the United States have forces on the ground in Syria. So the original argument's no longer valid, but that's the sort of the starting point for this division, the fact that neither side was ready or committed to go in with its own forces.
Yeah, it brings the question that hasn't Daesh been decimated? So, Helin, how much of an existential threat does this terror organization pose to Turkey, and what long-term threats could it have an impact on Turkey's country's security?
Well, this is the point that the United States is having difficulty to understand on the Turkish side. Turkey is quite sensitive about its national security, and this is a justful approach. And the United States has a difficulty to understand that YPG, or at least it is trying to camouflage it, that YPG is a part of PKK. And it's really difficult to divide them into two, to think that they are separate organizations. And as long as Turkey is feeling a threat from the YPG, from Syria, from Syrian territory through Turkish territory, I think this conflict between Turkey and the United States will continue. Looking from the American approach, the logic of surrogate warfare is to use a local force instead of another neighboring country, especially one like Turkey, which is a big power in the region, a regional power, an influential regional power. I think for the United States, it's quite easy to manage YPG instead of trying to persuade Turkey to act in certain ways. That's why it's using a local force. Using a local force is quite relatively, let's say, cheaper. It's tactical. It's for a short time. But as Richard Outzen already mentioned, the United States has already seen the negative sides of using surrogates in Afghanistan. Taliban was one of its surrogates in 1980s, and now it turned out to be one of the biggest threats against the United States. Of course, there's no direct threat from YPG or PKK to the United States. We've never seen that. That's why this comforts the United States. But at the same time, for the sake of this comfort, I think the United States is giving up its relation, its trust building with Turkey, which is a quite important problem in mutual relations.
All right. So, Rich, Mazlum Kobani, who is on Turkey's most wanted terror list, in a recent interview said that head of CENTCOM, General McKenzie, has personally assured him that the U.S. will not abandon YPG in Syria as it did in Afghanistan. What is Washington promises to the YPG, and in exchange of what?
I think that the clock is ticking, and I don't think that the Biden administration wants to stay in Syria forever. I don't think they want to leave this year. I think what they want to do is to arrange sort of a normalization with Assad that leaves the path open for a reconciliation between Assad and the YPG. Now, you'll remember that Hafez al-Assad, Bashar's father, had a very cozy relationship with the PKK. Öcalan stayed in Damascus for a long time. They had training camps in the Bekaa Valley. It was Damascus from which he was driven due to Turkish pressure in 97, 98 before he was captured. So I think recreating that is in the minds of some people, so that which to me is perverse, because I know what the PKK is. I've studied the history of it, and there's a contradiction between the PKK as a recognized foreign terror organization, an FTO with the blood of 40,000 people on its hands, and the idea that this is a group to which we owe some sort of moral debt because they fought against ISIS. Yet in Washington, more people are familiar with the latter argument, that this is a group to whom we owe some sort of moral debt because they fought ISIS, than with the former proposition that they are a terrorist organization to whom we owe nothing. So based on that logic, what I suspect we'll see is some outreach, perhaps like this energy deal that is being discussed in some quarters about the Egyptian gas via Jordan crossing Syria into Lebanon, which would make money for the Assad regime as the opening gambit of a normalization campaign that would result in Assad making an outreach to the YPG and having some sort of normalization that allows them some form of autonomy, but within the broad structure of the Syrian state. I think that's where this is headed. I don't think it's a sustainable policy. I don't think it's good actually for the Kurds of northeast Syria. I don't think Assad will treat them fundamentally any better than they did before the revolution. It will be a betrayal of the Syrian revolution, and it will create enduring problems for Turkey. So we'll see how Turkey plays that together with Russia and whether it normalizes with Assad in return.
So, Helin, how would that contentious issue come up when Biden and Erdogan meet later this month in Rome? And are we likely to see another cross-border operation to the region since the president had signaled before into the east of the Euphrates where the YPG is held up? I mean, talk to us about what will Turkey's breaking point be?
Well, the east of Euphrates is one of the very significant points in Turkish foreign policy. But the issue is not only related to the relations between Washington and Turkey, Ankara. It's also about the relationship with Russia, Moscow. Yes. And this is a kind of troublesome agreement or future agreement that we need, because without Russia, we cannot find any solution in the region. Without Washington, we cannot find any solution either. So Turkey is in between these two great powers in Syria. But at the same time, Turkey is trying to show both sides, I'm sure to Russia as well, that its national security is very important for it. And if it's if it's not guaranteed, if it is in danger, then of course Turkey will use military options once again.
Yes. Well, we'll see if this balancing act by Turkey is sustainable. Helin, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk.